Beyond is our budgeting tool. It's very important and we've been using it for 2 years now, and I wanted to share with you why we have been using Beyond. So you've asked me a few questions. One of them is, before Beyond, what budgeting challenges and pain points were you facing? Well, actually, before Beyond, we tried many things. We tried quite classical budgeting, which we did on spreadsheets, and it took quite a lot of time. And also the difficulty was that once we had the results, we just sort of saw that we were over on the budget, but it didn't really help us in the day-to-day management of the company. So it wasn't a very good solution. So we decided to drop budgets, to go beyond budgets actually, but we realized that just looking backwards at what was done didn't give us really the possibility to optimize the way we were using our funds. And so we looked for different solutions, and that's when the idea of Beyond came. And Beyond as a tool has been really, really useful. So then you say, what motivated us to solve these challenges? Well, actually, what motivated us really was that we've got a certain amount of funds. We know that's what we're going to have during the year. We've got an idea of our sales. We've got an idea of the increase. And those funds must be used by the teams to have the maximum impact. So that was our difficulty. We've really had a difficulty on the point of spend wisely, and spend to make the most of opportunities, and also spend to have the best return. Okay, so that's what motivated us, saying we've got to find something. But actually there's something else which was more profound, which motivated us. In this company, what we try to do is what is called to empower employees. We actually go further. We use the word of subsidiarity, which means that we try to give to each employee the responsibility for his task, for his mission actually, but also the power for his mission. And so if we had a budgeting system where we'd say, okay, you've got the responsibility to do X, but if you need to spend something, you've got to come and ask me. We were actually taking away the power. We also wanted to avoid the situation where the employee or the manager would say, okay, look, next year I'd like to do X, Y, Z. And we'd say, okay, fair enough, sounds reasonable, we give you the budget. And as the year goes by, they say, oh, actually X, Y, Z is not necessarily what we need to do. What we need to do is something else. And then they've got to start negotiating, they're deviating from the budget, and that's something we did not want to do. So we really wanted to be able to say, okay, you've got the money, spend it wisely, and adapt to reality. So that's the reason we said, okay, we need a tool like Beyond. Okay, you've also asked me, how does this relate to your broader business direction? But I've already partly answered that. Really, the most important for us is to empower employees, to let them really take the decisions which are necessary. I'll take just a simple example of our cleaning lady, which has got access to Beyond, has got her own budget. It's not a huge budget, but it's a budget. And she's in charge of cleaning, obviously, so she's the one who knows which are the best cleaning products to take. So, of course, she doesn't really need anybody else's input to know what to do. She's really a professional in that. But also, she's in charge of our kitchen. We've got a kitchen dining area for the employees. And we had 2 fridges. And one was a little bit small. And she looked at her Beyond, said, okay, how much money have I got? How much money have I got in my budget? And she realized that she could maybe buy a fridge, but that would mean that there's other things she was hoping to do that she won't be able to do. So what she did, she actually sold the previous fridge, the small one, got the money back, it went in her Beyond, and that way she was able to buy a new fridge, a bigger fridge, and to also have a little bit of money left so that she could continue doing what she needed to do. And she did that without asking anybody's permission, anybody's authorization, because if it's in the budget, by default it's authorized. And that's for us something which is important. It means if it's in your budget, whether you spend it for one activity or another activity doesn't really change. We know that you're not going to go over the budget. And also we know that you're going to do what's the wisest in that situation. And also we're going to see it. That's one of the big things with Beyond. We can actually see what's happening in each person's budget. Well, I am the general manager of the company. And so I can see everybody's activities. I don't need to go to that detail, except when I want to. Except when I see that there's something strange, or except when I'm just sort of browsing through the company and trying to understand what's happening, how are the people thinking, what are they doing, what are the activities on which they've actually affected their, allocated their budget. And that gives already a lot of information of how the company's going, how people are working, how they are thinking. Okay, you've then asked me, why did we choose Beyond over the competition? Well, actually, we did look at quite a few systems. We looked at building our own system, and we did for a moment. Beyond is actually the only system we found, having gone through a lot of systems from big ERPs like SAP to all different types of solutions, but we did not find the tool which allowed to say for each user, this is your budget, spread it out into activities as you see fit, reallocate it during the year as you see fit, but let me see what's happening. And there was no other tool that we found which allowed that. Now, you're also asking me which feature of Beyond was most appealing. I think the most appealing feature, actually there's two. One, it's on the user side. It's really easy for a user to use. It's visual. They can see, okay, this is my budget. When I use this budget, there's a little bit less left, and I've got it in activities. When I decide not to do an activity, it comes back in the budget. Okay. So it's a little bit like planning your own money, using your own money. It's a bit as if each user had his own bank account and says, okay, I can't go further. I can plan I'm going to use this. I set up an activity. As the expenses come in, I see, okay, this is going well. This activity might cost a little bit more. So where shall I save some money? And also what's very interesting on the user side is that each user has got his own personality. You've got some users who are going to say, okay, I got this budget, I'm going to split it up, and in the activities I'll do this year. And he's going to put everything in activities nicely spread out. Others who are going to say, okay, I'm going to do about 60-70%, I'm going to put it in activities, and I'm going to leave a little bit aside just in case something goes wrong. And so some people keep their buffers up at the top, other people keep their buffers within their activities. It doesn't really matter, but it allows each person to know that he's spending money, see how it's being spent in real time. That means he's done an activity, let's say he's gone off on a trip, comes back, hands in his expenses. It will all appear in the activity within a few days. And so he says, okay, this is where I am. Or every time they're going to buy something, whether directly or through our purchasing person in the company, they'll put their activity number. And so when the invoice comes in, that invoice will be affected directly to the activity. So I'd say that's one of the features that I find really, really appealing, is that for the user, it's easy and visual to use, and it allows him really to actually to act like a real person, a person with responsibilities, and a person with the level of power in correspondence to that responsibility. The second feature I find extremely interesting, it's that the level of the managers or even general management. So at the level of the managers, they can actually see not only their own budget and their own activities, but they can also see their team's budget and activities. And so it's a very easy way to look at one of your team members and saying, okay, that's an activity he's doing. He's planned to do this, he's planned to do that. And so when a manager talks to a team member, he can actually see what's being done, where he's putting his money, or the company's money. But I'm saying his money because basically he's got to manage it. It's his money because it's been given to him during the budget. And also we've got a feature in this company. We say if you don't spend a budget one year, don't worry, it will be brought over to the next year. We don't empty all the budgets at the end. We do that for an obvious reason, is that when we say you've got to spend your budget, at the end of the year people are spending things and it's not always necessary. And it also allows people to be much more prudent with their money because they know that if they save it, they can keep it to the next year. So, of course, behind there's a little bit of management to be sure not to overspend from one year to the next. But as far as motivation, employee motivation is, and I'd say real responsibility, it's very important. And so what it gives, and the feature I really like from the manager, is that there's this transparency. We know what's happening, we know where people are planning to put some money, we know what activities they're doing, we can talk to them about it, and it's updated in real time. Not only the money which is coming in, the money which is being allocated, affected to an activity, but also we know that some activities which seemed wise to do a few months ago today are not as important to do, so they can be taken away and reallocated. So within a budget, that means a person has got a certain amount of money, there's all the flexibility which is needed to be able to answer to market demand. Okay, so the next question you ask me is, how do you use Beyond? Who are the key user types? So we use Beyond very widely in the company. That means we're about 130 employees spread over 4 countries. And there's about 110 which use Beyond, because there are some who really don't need to spend. But on the 110, we've got all different types of activities. That means in the company, we do production, we do research, we do sales, obviously. We do also a lot of registration. So we've got different activities, different types of activities. And also we've got markets which are in Belgium, we've got markets in Spain, we've got markets in France, in Germany, in Austria. We've got different areas where we've got demand. And so we've got actually very different types of users using it. That means if you've got a production user, they've got quite set activities. So they're going to say, okay, this is the budget I've got during the year. I'm going to spread it out in the wisest way, try to optimize. If I can save a little bit on some production, I might be able to do some investment or some specific activity. But it's a better known entity. For research also, actually, because we do a lot of lab research, so we know what input we need, and we've basically got some personnel costs. And of course, there's some traveling and things like that. So within the research department, there's a small budget for, I'd say, all the extras so that you can be open to the world. The sales department, actually it's a communication department we've really got. The communication department needs really to adapt to the reality of the market. We are in a complex market, and sometimes we've got to go to some congresses, we've got to visit some of our clients, and we need to have the flexibility to do what is necessary. And that's where we see the most changes, thanks to Beyond, where there's really an adaptation to what's necessary, to the opportunities which are there to be able to create the interest in our products as we are moving forward. So we've got different types of users. We've got a lot of managers also. Managers can be just one person who's got one person in his team. We've got different levels of teams too. And so the manager can see the people in his team, and if these people in the team are also managers and have got people in their teams, there's a full transparency in it. So all types of users, all types of use cases, and Beyond has proved to be very flexible for that. Then you ask, have you benefited from using Beyond? Obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be talking. Beyond for us has been a fundamental tool to keep flexibility within the company and to bring down overhead costs to a minimum. Why overhead costs to a minimum? Because before we set up Beyond, one thing there was we had to authorize expenses. So anybody who wanted to do an expense had to, or to spend some money actually, even for an investment, they had to fill in a form. The form had to be signed by a manager. Sometimes it had to be signed by two managers. And there was waste of time in that, and also the managers weren't necessarily the ones who knew the best why something was needed, especially when you're in research and development in some very pointed subject, and you would ask a manager saying, there's this congress, I really need to go there, it's on this very high-tech subject. The manager would say, okay, maybe you know best, okay, I'll sign it off. And so there was a lot of paperwork, wasted time, and not necessarily any added information. And there could also be a lot of time wasted on explaining why it's important, and the manager could make the wrong decision saying yes or no. And also there's the added situation that when you ask a manager his authorization, you're actually asking him to take the responsibility of it. Whereas when the user does not ask for an authorization, fair enough. He can own the activity he's doing. If it goes well, well done, congratulations. And if it goes badly, he's also in charge, so he can learn from it. It's not, yes, but you told me I was allowed to do it. No, you took the decision, you did it, it didn't work, you failed. Okay, learn from it, and now move forward. And Beyond has allowed that. So a lot of benefits from Beyond, a lot of benefits. Also, transparency. I know how things are going in real time. Within a delay of a few days, maybe a week, but I know where we're going. And also, there's a very strong point on Beyond. We actually allocate budget during the year. That means we've got about 10 million budget in the year, and we're going to allocate about 11 million. So if we actually did spend everything, we might be in a problem. But two things. One, we know that people are being prudent with their budget. And overall, there'll be about £1 million left over. The second thing, it's that we never accept to go over budget. That means we're not going to go at the end of the year saying, okay, you've been 110% over budget. We don't accept it. Or you've been 102%. No, everybody will be 100% or less. That allows us to have a perfect control of what's happening. And also having the real-time information means that if ever we did feel we were going too fast in the expenses compared to what we've got, we could always tell users, look, we've got a slight issue here. We need you to reduce by 5% your budget. I won't tell you where. I'm not going to say you can't travel or you can't do this or you can't do that because you know better. But I need you to spend 5% less than what was allocated. It's never happened. We've been fortunate, it's never happened. But we know that with Beyond, we've got the tool to be able to do it. So I could go on talking about the benefits of Beyond. There are plenty. Now, the next question you ask me is, has Beyond saved money and or increased productivity? Yes, Beyond has saved money. Beyond has definitely saved the administrative cost of preparing a budget, the administrative cost of authorizing expenses. It's also saved money in not spending in an activity which we knew was not necessary, but which had been budgeted, which can happen, which could have happened. And I'd say it also allows us to be much more adaptable to the reality of the situation. That means if there's a good opportunity, we can make the most of it, or at least the person who spots the opportunity and it's within his mission can make the most of it. He doesn't need to waste time trying to get authorizations, etc., etc. He can actually do it. And then, has it increased productivity? It's most probably increased sales It's most probably increased sales productivity. It's very difficult to measure. It's very difficult to measure what the lost opportunities were in the past and what there is today. Okay, next question. How has Beyond helped with the planning of the new budget period? For us, it's a full year. Well, Beyond for us has really simplified the budgeting. Let me explain. At the general management level, that means at my level, with my CFO, my Chief Financial Officer, we'll sit down and we'll say, okay, reasonably, what will be the amount that we'll have next year to be able to continue with our activities? We've got an idea of what our turnover will be. We've got an idea of how the market is. We've got a general idea of how things are. And so we're going to say, okay, we've got 10 million to spend. Okay. We look through it and we say, we've got some structural costs. We know those, we keep them under control. So for us, it's personnel costs, for example, general insurances, loan interest, things like that. And we say we put that aside, we'll put it in Beyond, and it's the CFO which will have that within her own budget, her own activities, quite fixed. And then we say, okay, what's left over? Left over, I've got 7 direct department heads. The company is actually organized in these 7 departments, and I'm going to say, okay, with my CFO, what would each department roughly need to spend? I spread out the pie. That takes maybe half a day to do that work. Then I tell the head of departments, this is what you've got. organize yourself. So basically, at that level, what I've done is finished. The budgeting process is finished at my level. The manager now says, okay, I got 1 million, let's say, what will I do with it? And they're going to do actually the same process, saying, okay, I've got these different people in my team. I'd like to encourage one person, like I would have liked to encourage maybe one department who I saw was more strategic at that moment. But this is the money I've got, which is actually the reality of a company. In a company, you say, this is the money I've got. And so rather than having the budget process where you say, this is all I'd like to do, this is the money I'd need, and then I say, this is what I've got, we sort of cap the process and say, this is what you've got, now organize yourself to make it work. And so some managers will find it very challenging. Other managers will say, okay, this is the reality, and they'll adapt. Well, I'd say most actually adapt within what they've got. Maybe there's one or the other who'll come back saying, look, in my production, I've rarely done it and I won't be able to. But it doesn't really happen. It doesn't really happen. And anyway, when I do give out the money, I always keep a little bit more for contingencies during the year. If I see that there's opportunities at my level or opportunities which are seen in some departments and they say, we won't do it because we don't have the money, but if we had the money, we could make the most of this opportunity. So I always have a little bit of a buffer. And actually we realize that every department has got a little bit of a buffer. So basically, for me, it will take about a day with my CFO. For the managers, they'll also spend about a day. And as it goes down, the budgeting process is an ongoing process because the money they've got is allocated to activities as it is needed, as the opportunities arise. They've put aside what they know is really going to be necessary in one activity. And so budgeting is an ongoing process, really linked to reality. Okay, then, next question. What feature or functionality have you been most impressed with? It's a difficult question because beyond it's a budgeting tool within its own right. The whole thing is impressive. The user interface, the way to use it, it's visual. It's a nice tool to use. Maybe from a general management point of view, it's the capability of seeing the whole company and being able to drill down to specific activities and to specific expenses, regardless of where, in which country it was done, in which company it was done, because we've got a few companies in our group. And so it really gives us a vision outside of the administrative organization of a group, of a company. It really gives us the reality of our activity, of our overall activity, having many companies going towards a common mission. Next question. What have you learned from working with us? We've learned to appreciate the flexibility, but we were looking for it. I'd actually make the most of this question to say working with Beyond has been a very nice experience because there's a little chat box. If there's a question, if a user has got a question, he can just put a question in that little chat box, and within minutes he's got feedback, he's got an answer, how he does it, what it means. Sometimes there's, for new users, there's concepts which can be a little bit confusing. Well, what's an activity, what's allocated, what's the difference with a budget? And you've got that feedback in really, really quick. Beyond has been a very friendly and nice company to work with. Next question. What is the long-term impact of using our product? That's an important question. The long-term impact, it's really that we've been able to implement in day-to-day work the philosophy of our company. That means employees are empowered, they've got responsibility, but they've got the power to do their responsibility. They don't need to seek authorization before having an expense. They don't need to seek authorization before organizing an activity as long as it's within the budget. And also there's transparency. They've got the autonomy, but the autonomy comes at the cost of accepting the transparency. And so on the long term, that has really allowed our company to keep our nimbleness, our culture, and to develop it. And Beyond has been a fundamental tool to allow a philosophy to become a reality. So for us, it's long term. Beyond is part of the company. The next question is, have you seen any unexpected benefits from using Beyond? Yes, but I'd say it's nearly in the philosophy of Beyond. That means seeing how people, when they are empowered, when they've got the power to use their responsibility in real time, we see interesting things which are happening. Positive, creative, unexpected. And there's a lot of good things happening, which actually I will find out later on as they're happening, as I'm going through Beyond, seeing the results. And it's more often than not, the great majority of the cases, it's positive. I hadn't planned it, hadn't seen it, but somebody did plan it, somebody did see it, somebody saw the opportunity, and somebody did it. And that's one of the powers of having Beyond. Next question. What would you say to other businesses facing the same challenges as you did? How would you describe Beyond to them? Beyond is a great tool if you believe in your employees. If you want to build a company where there's trust, where there's initiative, where people are creative, where you can see opportunities and make the most of it, go for Beyond. Brilliant tool. And if you don't want to waste time on budgeting, go with Beyond. And if you don't want to overspend, go with Beyond, because we're seeing in real time what's happening. So if a company asks me, do you want to use Beyond on a scale of 1 to 10? A 10. No doubt about it. It's a great tool. You've got to learn how to use it. You've got to bring it within your company, within your culture. But it's definitely worth it. Then the question, is there anything else we should know? Well, yes. Beyond, we've been using it for about 2 years now. It's a tool which has evolved over time. I know that the Beyond team listens to users, but also the Beyond team is a team which thinks and which is trying to bring a reality, a tool which is not an administrative tool, a tool which is not a legal necessary tool. It's really a management tool. It's really a tool which allows companies to do what they do and to do it the best they can. Numbers. Now some other questions. What is the total number of employees in your company? Well, as I said, we're about 130 employees in our company with over 100 which use Beyond. Then, how many activities are being managed within Beyond? It's not really a number I look at. I'd say an average user would have between 5 and 15 activities. So overall, I'd say there's over 1,000 activities at any one time in the company. And activities are actually the size which the employee feels comfortable with. I've got my own activities within Beyond. They're the size and they're meaningful for the activity that I've got. Then you say, are there any other metrics you can share to give a sense of the scale of your company? Yes, about 10 million under budget, 110 users. We've had about 50% growth over the last 4 or 5 years. So a growing company who's using Beyond and who likes it. Okay, then, next question. Roughly, how long was spent on budgeting before we used Beyond? By managers, by accountants, by budget holders, project managers. It would be about a 2-month process where we'd give a budget format, give it to the managers. The managers would have said all the activities they wanted to do for the following year. It'd be a budget presentation. They'd present why they wanted that. We'd take back the overall amount which had been asked for. Then we'd decide where we'd put our priorities, get back to the budget managers, and we'd say, look, you've got to trim down. We don't really believe in this activity. This one, no. How can you reorganize that? They'd represent within the new budget. The accountants would be consolidating that during the whole period. And then afterwards, during the year, we'd have, at the end of each quarter, basically, we'd compare budget to real. Sometimes would be above, sometimes would be below. A lot of time, actually. Next question. How much time gap was there between a cost being incurred, planned, and it become visible in the budget? Well, we'd have quarterly budgets, which were given. So it wasn't really meaningful. We just basically knew that we hadn't budgeted well, because what the manager would say, well, I did what was necessary. I went over budget, or I had planned that, but it didn't make sense. And so it didn't really help us. The figures we got basically let us know if we had a good budgeting feeling, if we could sort of predict the future. It didn't help us in day-to-day. Then the next question is, were there any other costs associated with the budgeting process prior to using Beyond? Yes, the world was a different place, actually. Beyond really has allowed us to save some money in the way we're organized, much more efficient, less overhead, less administrative cost, less time, less justification, less frustration that budget had been allocated or not, that an activity had been accepted or not. So also a question I jumped, which is how much avoidable spending was incurred because of the lack of visibility. It's very difficult to measure. People don't come saying, oh, I spent that, I really didn't need to. But the organization of the budget did not help to have people responsible for spending, because basically they could spend in their budget. There was no saving. The fact going over or under budget, apart from maybe having a scolding or something, because we basically budget on expenses, did not really bring any feedback. So there was not really a culture of spending wisely, which with Beyond we had. Okay, then the question you're asking me is roughly how long is spent on budgeting? Creation, updates, tracking, by managers, by accountants, by budget holders, project managers. So making the budget take a day, a couple of days for a user. He'll think of his activities, he'll spread them out. Beginning of the year, actually it goes with what he's planning about the coming year, what he's thinking to do. When you're more in production, they'll look at what happened last year and say, okay, this roughly is where I've got to go this year. And so quite straightforward. They don't need any feedback. They won't seek necessary feedback. They may ask for some, but they won't need it to decide how the activities are spread out. And then afterwards, activities is something which can be changed during the year. If you see something was necessary and it's no more necessary, you take it away as an activity. You've got more money in your budget, which can be allocated to something else. So you've got this flexibility. And then regularly, users will look at their beyond, look where they are on their activities, see if they've overspent, underspent on a specific activity. If they overspent, they'll allocate a little bit more because you can't overspend. But they'll allocate a little bit more within their budget. They might even have to say, okay, this other activity which I'd planned to do, I won't be able to do it. So it's the real time. They might look at it weekly. And for the accountants, we've actually got a specific situation because we've got different companies. Not all our accounting packages are automized with Beyond. We thought about it, but because of the power of Beyond, we said, okay, it doesn't matter. So what we've got our accountants to do, they do the normal accounting in their accounting software, and then afterwards, they'll actually do the accounting of these expenses a second time in Beyond. It might seem like a lot of work, but it's not. It's really taking the invoices. The invoices normally come with the activity code, and thanks to the activity code, it's given directly to the right person in the right activity. If it doesn't bear an activity code, it will be sent to the person who himself will allocate it to an activity. So for the accountants, it's quite straightforward. It's basically an amount, a name, a project number, which they can send. And for the added value we've got, it's worth every penny of administrative cost we put in there, which is actually pretty low. Okay, so the last question is there anything I'd like to share about Beyond? Anything I've learned? Well, yes, Beyond is a great tool. Beyond for us is actually a fundamental tool to manage the company the way we want to manage it. That means with empowered employees who've got responsibility, who've got the power to do it, so they can be creative, they can be responsive, they accept the transparency. Together we know what's happening and we see how things are happening. And really where each person can express his own personality, but within a framework where I know that we will never overspend. And I know that money will be spent to the best ability of each person, to his best wisdom of each person. It doesn't mean there won't be some mistakes, but we'll know where they are. They'll be within a certain amount also, and we'll be able to learn from them. But basically, we're going to have something much better. We're going to have engaged employees who do things which will surprise me, and will surprise me in the right way. And I'll say, I'm so happy that they took the decision. So Beyond is a great tool. We love it. And I'm just happy to have done this video to explain why for us Beyond is such an important tool. Thank you.